patriotic, to be outspoken.
We are millions strong, and we want another world.
Don't give up.
It's exciting to write books that I wanted to see in the world.
This has been the most rigorous medication rollout this world has ever seen.
So it's not prison. Get loud.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Allie Cottle, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this event tonight. In just a moment, we'll bring on our featured guest, Brenda Solórzano. As all of you know, she began her new role as the California Endowment's president and CEO about 2 months ago. She comes to the endowment from the Headwaters Foundation, which is based in Missoula, Montana, and works to promote health equity and build community power in Western Montana. Some of you may also know her from her past philanthropic work in California, where she held leadership roles at the California Healthcare Foundation and the Blue Shield of California Foundation. She's held a lot of important jobs, but to me and my younger brother Kian, the most important thing is our mom. I'm excited for all of you to meet my mom tonight and learn more about what motivates her and what she's looking forward to about returning to California and taking on this new leadership role at the California Endowment. Before we dive into our discussion, I do want to remind everyone tuning in. This conversation is being recorded and will be posted on the California Endowment's website tomorrow. We'll send everyone a link to the recording. You can share it with your friends who couldn't be here or take another look for yourself. Before we begin, I want to introduce Frida Bloom and Brenda Terry, who will be providing Spanish and American Sign Language interpretation services tonight. They have some instructions for us.
Thank you. In order to provide language access, this meeting will have simultaneous bidirectional interpretation into Spanish as well as American Sign Language. My name is Frida Bloom, and I'll provide interpretation in Spanish, and my colleague, Brenda Terry, who you see next to me, will provide interpretation in American Sign Language. If you wish to continue to see Brenda after this demonstration, please click the interpretation button below and select American Sign Language, and I'll explain how to enable the feature in Spanish. A efecto de proporcionar acceso lingüístico, contaremos con interpretación simultánea al español. Si usted es bilingüe, no tiene que presionar nada, pero si usted no es bilingüe y está en su computadora, en unos segundos verá un icono en forma de globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Haga clic en interpretación y después seleccione español o Spanish. Desde su iPad o su teléfono, en unos segundos, busque el menú de 3 puntos o que dice More en una de las esquinas de la pantalla. Haga clic en interpretación y después seleccione español o Spanish y después aceptar, finalizar o done. Gracias. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Frida. Let's get going. I am honored to introduce to you the president and CEO of the California Endowment and my mom, Brenda Solórzano.
Ellie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I was excited about the opportunity to have this time to connect with you and share a little bit about who I am with the rest of the TCU world.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, I'm currently on the East Coast for college, so this is a unique time for us to get to chat and connect and share a bit of our conversation with all of you guys. So first I want to ask, you're about 2 months into your tenure as TCE's president and CEO. How's it going so far?
Well, it's wonderful. I am delighted to be back in California, our home state. It has been a whirlwind, a little bit like drinking out of a fire hose because there's so much information and so much to learn. I've been spending a lot of time getting to know the endowment, so really focused internally, meeting the team, learning about all the great things that the staff here at the California Endowment do, learning about the amazing work that we have the privilege of funding across California and learning about the great work that our grantees are doing. So it's been fun, but a lot of new stuff for me to understand and learn.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about your roots in California. You were raised in California. You came to this country as a baby when your family, my grandparents, immigrated to San Francisco from Guatemala. How did your experience growing up as an immigrant in a family of immigrants shape your worldview?
Well, it plays a significant role in who I am and how I think about the world and what I want to be doing. As an immigrant child, I had to navigate a world where uh, my parents didn't necessarily speak English, didn't understand the world, and I became kind of that go-between interpreter. And saw a lot of things happen to my family in that role that made me realize that there were a lot of unfair things that happen in the world to people who don't have power, who don't have voice, who don't have agency. And that became the thing that motivated me to really start thinking about how can I be in this world and help people like your grandparents? How can I make a difference? And that's been a motivating factor for me since I was a little kid. It also, growing up in San Francisco, which I love being from San Francisco, I didn't realize that the rest of the world wasn't like San Francisco. And I know that seems kind of silly, but not having ever had a lot of opportunities to see what the rest of the world was like as a kid, not having opportunities to travel to different states and understand the diversity that exists in the United States, I had a really narrow view of the world. And I thought every place was diverse and every place was like San Francisco. And as I've grown up, I realized, I was really very much in an ecosystem that was very unique. And that has just been, an interesting place to come from and a little bit jarring when I finally got out into the quote unquote real world. So when I was in college, like you are today, there was things I was learning about power and inequities and things that were really hard for me to learn for the first time being in college. And so all of those things as I've grown up and had a long career in policy and health and in philanthropy, shape who I am and how I think about the world and the work that I want to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I have a great follow-up question from our audience. This is from Hector Sanchez Flores from San Jose. He asks, is there a tradition from your family that you think philanthropy should adopt?
Oh, yes, there is. And I'd be curious to hear, Ellie, what you would say to this question as well, because you've learned a lot about philanthropy, watching me in my roles, but also just in your own experience. But the thing that really stands out for me that I wish philanthropy would adopt from my family is the concept of familia and love. Oftentimes we sit in ivory towers, we sit in positions of power and authority in philanthropy, and we forget that at the end of the day, we're really here working with people who are trying to make the world a better place. And I wish that we would step more boldly into the notion of love for each other, being there for each other, and seeing the humanity in each other. That's one of the things that I always enjoyed about being around our family and sitting around the table and having that human connection and that love. And I really wish that there was more of that unapologetically in the field of philanthropy.
Yeah, I will say you touched on what I think my answer would be towards the end there, and that's how my grandparents, your parents lived with us for most of my years in high school. And one thing I think we did that was really unique is that we would sit around the dinner table every night and have a formal dinner, and just talk about our days and talk about what's going on in the world and just share information with each other. And I think that kind of open conversation is something that could be really helpful in the field of philanthropy as well as in the world today. So that would be my answer to the question.
Yeah, I love that answer, Ellie. That's a good one too.
Let's talk about Montana. So you came to TCE from Headwaters, which is based in Missoula. What are some lessons you learned in your 7 years working in Western Montana?
Oh, geez, it was such a great experience for me, Ellie, because I learned to be in a very different ecosystem than the one that I was used to here in California. And I realized that many of the challenges that people face in California are the same that people face in Montana, and that we're all trying to have a better place for our children, our families, and our communities. And hard work is happening everywhere to make that a reality. And so I had an opportunity to really get to work and get to know people that had diverse viewpoints from mine, and had an opportunity to work with them and realize that, you know, if we sit together and we have a conversation and we see the humanity in each other, we begin to understand that we all want the same thing and we can work together. And so that was a big learning for me, because I had spent so much time just talking to people like me and people who believe like me, and having an opportunity to be in a different space that challenged that notion was a great way for me to learn and understand the complexity of the country we live in and everything that we have to deal with. I think another thing that I learned about working in Montana is how much this work is really not about the dollars that we're putting out, but the people that we're investing. So we at Headwaters were much smaller than the California Endowment is, but with small little grants that were given in unrestricted ways to nonprofits, the amazing things that they did, because we were investing in individuals that cared so deeply about their communities, that really struck me, and how we need to think about it. It's not just the money, it's the people. And also the size of the grant doesn't matter. Really what matters is the people that are doing the important work. The other thing that I'll say is we got to do the work very differently in Montana than traditional philanthropy. And what I learned is that many of the things that we have created in the field of philanthropy that are around your bureaucracy, compliance, procedures, are things that we've made up as a field to protect ourselves. And the reality is that many of those things aren't needed. And we took a lot of risks in Montana in the way that we did our grant making, but the way that the community used those resources and the impact they had was just amazing to see. And being able to bring that back to California and the California Endowment is really exciting to me.
Definitely. Do you think the philanthropic strategies you used in Montana are applicable to California?
Oh, absolutely. The thing that we did in Montana at the Headwaters Foundation was really center community. And by centering community, I mean allowing people in communities, people with lived experience, to define what are the challenges that their communities were facing, what are the solutions, and then we just became facilitators of getting resources to those organizations. That's something we could do here in California as well. And we can simplify the process, and we can streamline the process, and we can make it easier for grantees in California to access the resources that the California Endowment has. I think one of the neatest things that we did is actually not put the board or the CEO or the staff in the position to make decisions around who got money at every turn. We actually gave those decision-making powers to people in the community. Again, that was really transformative, and I think something that we could experiment with here at the California Endowment.
Yeah, for sure. I have another pretty relevant audience question. This question comes from Jennifer in Los Angeles. She says, Montana and California seem worlds apart. What is something you want Californians to know about Montanans and vice versa?
Oh, that's a great question. I think what I would want to know is that at the end of the day, we're all people. And I think that there has been a lot of work that has been done to create an us versus them mentality in the world. And so I would want people in Montana and people in California to see that We are all humans. We all need housing. We all need healthcare. We all need access to education and economic opportunities. And we want the same things. The solutions might vary, right? But the opportunity to sit down at those tables that you said and have conversation and listen to each other might create opportunities for us to realize that we have a lot more in common and a lot of great idea sharing that we could do, and not focus on those things that are driving us apart. And you know, when I think about California, I think of California as a microcosm of the country. And I think there are lots of tables that the endowment could be setting and bringing people together to have those kinds of conversations. But it's interesting because when I went to Montana, I didn't know anybody. I did not know a soul. I had never even been to Montana. And when I left after almost 8 years of being there, I had a lot of friends and colleagues, and they're just other people working hard to try to create more equality in this country. And that's something that I would want Californians to know, and I want Montanans to know that there are people doing that same work here in California.
Yeah, I have to say, I only lived in Montana for 5 years, but people there are very friendly, that's for sure. The small town mentality is something very unique to the state, I think. I feel
Yeah.
like dancing around the. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, the small town and sort of real ruralness of Montana makes it that you have to rely on each other for a lot of different things. And so you see people as sort of your neighbor, your community member. And that was something that I really enjoyed about living and working in Montana. It's a little different coming to California with, you know, much bigger state, a lot more people in here.
Yeah, for sure. So I was gonna ask, I feel you kind of dancing around this, so I feel like we should touch on it. Today marks 2 weeks since an incredibly tense, emotional, and divisive election day. How do you approach building connections and community beyond political divides?
Yeah. I mean, I wish I had the magic bullet for that. I don't, but I can share with you, Ellie, some of the things that I've been thinking about. One is creating spaces for dialogue. I think is really important. I think creating spaces for people to have places to be seen and heard. I think thinking about all the ways that we in society are now connecting and creating opportunities for people that normally don't talk to each other to have an opportunity to talk to each other. You know, we've gone into a place where people are really isolated. And it's not only the environment, but we're also coming out of post-COVID, right? And the challenges that created in further isolation and less you know, human connection. It's why I get mad at you and Kian when you guys are on your phones at the dinner table, right? It's important to have that human connection, that humanity, and creating those spaces to be able to do that, whether it's at home, in a neighborhood, in a church, in a nonprofit situation.
Yeah, for sure. I have to say, I'm Gen Z. Like, I have to be on my phone. That's where the world is happening.
Yeah, and you know what, Ellie, I know that, and I think that that's one of the things that people in philanthropy need to understand about the new generation. Like, where are you? How are you engaging? How are you getting your information? And how are we going to pivot? You know, you guys always make fun of me and Daddy for, you know, not knowing how to turn off the volume on our phone. But the reality is that people like me who are now in these roles need to understand this new world and this new way of being in the world. And so I have a lot to learn. I have a lot to learn from you guys and from other young people in California.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we talk about in my classes. I'm a journalism major, so learning about how to communicate and the changing information landscape is something very, very pressing in all of my studies and in all of my experience. I want to touch on something. I saw in the chat someone mention Native nations in Montana. I think it's important to discuss the similarities between marginalized communities in both California and Montana. Can you share about your experiences working with the native tribes in Montana?
Yeah, that was a huge learning curve for me. I had done some work with Native communities before I went to Montana, but not extensively. And I went to a place where the largest non-white population were natives and the tribes that are situated in that geography. It was sometimes some of the hardest work that I did, but also the most amazing work that I did. And I had to start by really acknowledging my ignorance around the history of Montana, the history of colonization in Montana, and attempting to build trusting relationships with communities that have historically not had any reason to trust anybody, quite honestly. And so that was a transformational experience for me. I think the other piece that was really fascinating for me was to learn that we weren't working with just Native communities. We were working with tribal nations that are sovereign. And there is a whole other element of what does it mean to work with a sovereign nation. And that was a great experience for me, particularly because of some of the practices that I learned from the tribal communities, right? So the respect of listening to elders, the importance of narrative work, the connection to culture, the connection to land, the realization that Native communities have had answers to challenges that we face today around the environment, around health, around wellness, around spirituality. And that, we've systematically erased that knowledge from our society, and yet it is alive and being practiced in places across this country, and particularly what I was able to see in Montana. It was one of the reasons that drew me to the work in Montana, and it's probably one of the things that I miss the most is being able to center our Native communities in the way that we did at Headwaters.
Definitely. Another question from the chat. This is from Martin Zog. California is also home to the largest populations of refugees and asylum seekers. How is TCE going to prioritize the needs of refugees, asylees, and asylum seekers as we go forward through the next 4 years?
Yeah, well, there are so many populations that right now TCE needs to think about, and refugees, immigrants, name all the categories, are one that we have, and we will continue to help think about how we can better support the efforts to address the variety of needs that those communities need. But when you think about all the isms that exist in the world today, there are so many other populations that we have to be thinking about. And it's, our LGBTQ brothers, it's our Black and Brown folks, it's our trans community. There are just so many other groups, I can't even begin to name them all. And we have to be thoughtful about how we're thinking about all these populations and what we can be doing to help them do the important work that creates more equity and more humanity for those communities.
Absolutely. Here's a good question from Margaretta Lynn in Northern California near Richmond. She asked, what keeps you hopeful for our communities and for our world?
Yeah, a couple of things keep me hopeful. One is people. And it's funny because people also make me frustrated, but people also make me hopeful, because when I think about the things that I have been a part of, particularly in the field of philanthropy that I've had the honor of funding, I can tell you lots of stories of individuals that are doing hard work every day that I've had the opportunity to support with a grant or with thought partnership or with convening or some other tool out of a foundation, and the amazing things that happen. Just today, I was actually sitting with one of our staff here at TCE, and she was sharing the story of how some work here in Los Angeles by a very local community and people in that community that drove an effort to change the law in California so street vendors could operate across the state. That was done in a local community by individual people, and the impact it had statewide. And as she was telling me this story, I was like, yeah, this is why we do this work, because people are what is making the world a better place, you know, individually and then collectively. And that gives me hope. I think young people give me hope. You know, when I watch you and Kian and your friends talk about the challenges that exist in the world, the challenges that you guys face, the things that are happening and where the young people are raising concerns and issues and elevating things. I see that, you know, that there are youth that are very engaged in caring about their future and their world, and that gives me hope. And then, you know, one of the things that I have realized, because I have made this big transition to TCE, and, you know, we're now kind of in a whole different world. It's sometimes hard to come in and have hope. And so I'm always trying to figure out, how do I do that for myself? And one of the things that really brings me joy every morning, Allie, is that I get greeted at the front gate by Jorge, who sits at the gate at TCE, has the biggest smile and gives me the warmest greeting every day. And he makes me feel like, okay, it's a new day and I can do anything. And that hope, right, that comes from individual people in those individual moments are just so meaningful and transformative for me.
Hope really is one of the most powerful tools that we have.
Absolutely, Ellie.
Next, I have a question submitted by Alberto Medina from Los Angeles. He asks, what do you consider your greatest accomplishment? I'd like to divide that into two questions. What is your greatest professional accomplishment and your greatest personal accomplishment?
Okay, so you're probably going to get a little bored about my answer, but it comes back to people again. And I think this is going to show, like, I'm a really relational leader. I'm a relational person. People matter. So when I think about the most important professional thing that I've done in my career, it's thinking about all those people that I've had the opportunity to mentor and launch into different roles and careers. And I can think about a long list of people in California, a long list of people in Montana, and a long list of people across the country that I've had the honor and privilege of working with, and seeing the amazing things that they're doing now in different roles and with increasing responsibility, and know that I had a little bit of a role in helping them along their journey just gives me so much pride. And that's what I'm really most proud of, that network, that, you know, people that have worked with me. I think personally, the thing I'm most proud of you, and you're probably going to blush, Ali, but it's you and Kian. It's really hard to balance motherhood and a career. And there are often times that in that role, you have to make difficult trade-off choices. And sometimes I may not have made the right choice for you and Kian, but as I see you and him being successful young adults, you know, beginning to carve out your own work, your own careers, I'm really proud that I was able to be part of being your mom. And I can't wait to see where that goes for each of you.
Come on, that's a cop-out answer.
It's not a cop-out answer. I mean, I think you're going to say it's a cop-out answer because you're my daughter and you like to, like, do those kinds of things and say those kinds of things. But it's true, Allie. I think that as parents, our biggest joy is and hope and everything is our children. It might be corny, it might be cop-out, but it is true, Allie.
Well, since you're talking about children, let's touch on how TCE is supporting families in California.
So, you know, TCE has been around for a long time. And at the core, TCE has been about addressing the inequalities that have existed, continue to exist in this state and in this country, and supporting efforts to change that, address those inequities is at the core of what TCE has been about, the entire time that we've been here. We've had different strategies to do that, right? At one point, we were kind of more in the health space. At another point, we became really focused on building healthy communities in Healthy California, which is both a local effort and a statewide systems change effort, all around addressing health inequalities. And now we're really, we were learning from those investments and realizing that what we need to be doing is creating spaces for there to be power and agency by these communities to address these inequities, and that the inequities exist across many systems, and the endowment has been supporting that work to address those inequities in those systems. For me, it's not a day to come in and completely radically make a left turn or a 90-degree turn or whatever you want to call it and change that. That continues to be the reason why the endowment exists. It's the reason why I was drawn to take this role. I think that we'll continue to explore better ways to support the communities and our grantees, and particularly beyond the checks. I mean, the check is always sort of the big thing, but there are so many different roles that foundations can play. And I'm really interested in thinking about how can we deploy that pretty comprehensive toolkit that a foundation can have towards improving the lives of children and families in this state.
Definitely. There's almost too many issues that TC funds that are really important and pressing, and it's impossible to have a thorough discussion about each of them in the 1 hour I have to tell everybody about you. So let's look at, like, on a broader scale, you're known for trust-based philanthropy. So can you explain that term for people who may not be familiar with it and kind of talk a bit about how that's the framework that you use when approaching a wide variety of issues and populations?
Yeah, so Ellie, I want to answer that question, but before I do, I have to actually go back a little bit to why I even got to trust-based philanthropy. So I, as you know, have been in the field longer than you have been alive. And in that experience, I have held a variety of roles in foundation land. And one of the things that has been frustrating for me is to see how foundations operate. The amount of power and privilege that is held by foundations and those of us that work in foundations and run foundations hold. And it often to me felt like it was a broken system. One that was rooted in some policies, practices, and approaches that came from the history of where philanthropy comes from, which is government, business, and the law. And there was a time when I was frustrated with philanthropy to the point that I wanted to leave. And at that moment, I had an opportunity to be in a program where I got to reflect on what I wanted to do with the rest of my career. And in that year of exploration, and you don't remember this because I think you and Kian were pretty little when I was going through that program. But in that program, someone gave me the permission to dream about what philanthropy might look like if we did it differently. Gave me the permission to reinvent how philanthropy could operate and really bend the power dynamic that exists between foundations and nonprofits. And that's where I started to develop a vision for what is now called trust-based philanthropy. And I was lucky that the Headwaters Board took a chance on me and hired me to start up and build Headwaters as what is now known as a trust-based philanthropy. And what it is a recognition that, and I actually have something that I have to look like I put on my glasses, a recognition that philanthropy has contributed to systemic inequalities. And that's something we have to own and live with. And part of the practice of trust-based philanthropy is to address those inherent power imbalances that exist between foundations and nonprofits. And that means that we have to actually work at redistributing the power. And that power needs to be redistributed at the system level, at the organization level, and at the personal level. And that only when we do that will we actually be partners in creating a more equitable world and an equitable, more equitable nonprofit sector. And so this means that not only do we need to reimagine how we do it, but how we lead this work, how we structure the work, how we think about the leadership that we need to be providing, and really eliminate the bureaucracy that we have created so that it becomes easier for nonprofits to not chase money and not turn themselves into pretzels to get money, but to rather receive that money in ways that allow them to do the important work that they know they need to do. And so if you kind of think about trust-based philanthropy, it's kind of like eliminating as many of those power dynamics and bureaucracies as you can, so that we can, in actuality, be in true partnership with our grantee partners. We got to demonstrate that this can happen at Headwaters. I was there 7.5 years as the CEO, and we got to practice this way. And the positive feedback we got from our grantees, the transformative work that they felt they were able to do because we were doing multi-year general operating support, I think demonstrated, this concept that if we did it differently, we could have a different kind of outcome and relationship with our grantee partners. So that's really what it's about. And I'm excited about the opportunity of thinking about how do you scale what we did at Headwaters at an organization of the size and importance of the California Endowment.
Definitely. I know I learned a lot about philanthropy and trust-based philanthropy traveling with you, going to your talks. There are some really memorable experiences from our time in like Montana when I would travel along with like a group of federal funders taking photos as you guys met with your grantees across the state. And so I'm sure people in California are wondering, when do you plan to start visiting your grantee partners in California?
That's a great question. And I think this has been one of the harder parts of being in the role in the way that I have been at the beginning. So I made a commitment to the staff and the board at the California Endowment that I was going to focus internally the first few months that I was here. And part of that was my desire to understand this organization, to understand the team, to understand how we worked. Because I felt like I could go out and talk about who Brenda was. I could talk about the work in Montana, but I couldn't really talk about the endowment in the way that I felt I needed to. So I've been spending the first, few months here so far inside the organization, and I've learned a lot, but I'm really eager to get out and start, having that external focus and meeting with grantees and getting to understand the work from their perspective and hearing what are their hopes and dreams for the California Endowment moving forward. So I am looking forward to the new year, because that's sort of the time frame, is really beginning to get out in the beginning of the year across the state, right? Not just here in LA where I'm based, but making sure that I'm hitting all the different communities across this humongous state. And being there, and not just a one-time thing, right? Like I've already visited our regional offices, and I plan to be working out of those regional offices for periods of time so that I actually have an opportunity to connect with folks. We're also working on doing a little road show in February so that I can get out and start connecting and meeting people. So that's the exciting part that I'm looking forward to, and that will be the next phase of this work. And for me, I've been missing that, I'm craving that, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I can imagine that that's one of the most rewarding parts of the job, is seeing the impact with your own eyes. Here's another interesting question from the audience, a bit more lighthearted perhaps. If you could get advice on an ongoing basis from any historical figure, who would you choose and why?
Geez. Wow. I think it would be President Lincoln. And the reason that I would pick him, one, I'm a history major, and I love presidential history in particular. You know that, Allie. And so that's part of the reason why I pick him. But the reason I pick him is that he was leading the country at the time when it was a very divided country. And he had to make some calls, and there's probably differing opinion on whether or not he made the right calls. But I think it would be interesting to get some advice from him about how he thought about bringing the country together and how he thought about making sure that we could collectively see the bigger purpose, right? At that time. So he would be somebody that I would be interested in getting advice from right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good choice. I honestly don't know who I would pick, but I'm not a history major.
Maybe you should take some history classes.
I did in high school. I like to focus on the present and the future personally.
I love that, Ellie.
A lot of the people on this call are endowment grantees and partners. They're watching us right now. What message do you want to communicate to them?
That the endowment is here and will be here. That we are committed to the work that we have been supporting. And we're going to continue down that path. We're not going anywhere, right? That there is a leadership change, but the North Star continues to be what the North Star has been for the California Endowment. And I want folks to know that. I think the other thing I want folks to know is that I recognize it can be sometimes challenging to work with foundations that are of the size and complexity of the endowment. And I'm hoping that we can change that and create a better grantee experience for folks that are grantees of the endowment. And I'd also want them to know that, you know, I'm interested in listening. I have never been one to believe that I have the answers. And most of the work that I've done over my career has come from having conversations with people who are on the ground doing the work. And so I'm hoping that people feel like they have an opportunity to provide me and other folks at the endowment with those insights. I know some of you already have, and I hope that continues to be the case.
Definitely. And then I think I want to ask, this is another audience question I spotted in the chat. What will your vision be for resourcing housing justice and more broadly, transformative community-based organizing?
I think it's always interesting when people ask me my vision. My vision doesn't matter from my perspective. What my vision should be about is empowering people who are doing the work to determine what is their vision and what is it that we need to be supporting and providing. I know that we have lots of grantees that are doing housing justice, that are doing criminal reform, that are doing just a variety of different things. And I want that to be the voice that leads what the endowment is funding, not what Brenda thinks. I think another thing that I'll share with folks is that I often tell my teams when I've worked at different foundations, and I will tell this to the endowment as well, is that we have the honor and privilege of stewarding these resources. It doesn't mean we have the answers or that we should be dictating what the solutions are to the challenges that exist in California, and that this money doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to the board. It doesn't belong to our staff. It belongs to the people of California. I firmly believe that. And that's why trust-based philanthropy is such an important thing for me, that the answers to this, to what the vision should be and what we should be investing should be coming from people on the ground.
Definitely. That's the core of trust-based philanthropy, and that's something that I've really learned a lot about from my time watching you speak and having you take your Zoom calls in my bedroom during COVID. Here's another audience question. This is from Gwen Foster. Many foundations have turned away from responsive grant making. What are your thoughts about reviving or expanding this strategy to strengthen agencies and communities?
Yeah, I actually am. I'm a fan of responsive grant making, but I have a little bit of a caveat on it, which is the foundation needs to understand, what's the ecosystem it's playing and set some parameters, and then allow community groups, nonprofit groups to come in and get that funding. At Headwaters, we had a program that you know about, Allie, but I want to share with the audience that we called Go Grants. And Go Grants were a grant making program that we simplified. So on average, it would take people about 5 minutes to apply. We could review and approve within 24 hours, and we can get a check out to a grantee organization within a week. And sometimes it was even faster. I mean, sometimes a proposal would come in the morning, we get approved before the end of the day, and then the check would be out the next day. And the way that we did that was that we automated the system and automated the due diligence. And we don't have enough time for me to sort of explain how all of that worked. But some of the most amazing work that I saw when in my tenure at Headwaters came from those Go Grants. They were small grants, but they were general operating support. And the way that community groups were able to leverage that money and drive towards impact on what they saw was the work that they needed to do. It was just phenomenal. And it also created a pipeline for us of communities and organizations that we were not aware of, that we then could bring into some of our larger portfolios and other grant making efforts. We could totally do that. And I think I'm hoping that we'll have an opportunity to explore that in California. We'll pilot it probably first and then kind of grow it. And, I'm excited about the opportunity to have that as a mechanism here at the California Endowment.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're talking a lot about your work, and that's something that I think is super important. And that's obviously what most people here are here to talk about tonight. It's something that I know a ton about, like more than most people would expect. I feel like most 21-year-olds don't know all the intricate details of, I'm like, Go Grants, your credit card metaphor that you used to speak about. But
Well,
I do want to
Ellie, that's what happens when you have a pandemic and we have to share a room and you got to listen to all my talk about work.
I know, I can't believe you made my bedroom your office. But as for like a more fun question, I'm just wondering, saw this in the chat as well, what are some songs that you think are the soundtrack to your life so far?
Oh, Ellie, that's not a good question for me because I like to listen to music, but I can't remember the name of any song or who sang it or anything like that. So I'm gonna have a hard time. Maybe I'm gonna flip it on you and say, if you had to pick a soundtrack that describes your mom's life journey, what would you pick?
Oh no, I'm the one asking the questions tonight. I do know you are a very big fan of Pink, and I think she has one song, Irrelevant, that I feel like could be pretty timely. What if I rephrase the question? What are some themes from your life so far that you feel like are informing your view today and who you are as a person?
Yeah, I came from a family that benefited from the safety net in every way, shape, and form. I'm a Head Start kid. I'm a Pell Grant kid. Grew up getting my healthcare services at community health centers in the Mission District, actually. And so never give up, right? Like you just never give up. You just keep working. And sometimes it gets hard and it feels like impossible, but you just never give up. I think another one is, love and connection. When I think about all the things that I've had to deal with in my life, the love I've gotten from my family, from my parents, the connections to people that have helped me through that, has definitely been part of, my journey and something that is part of me. I think blessings is probably another one. As you know, I'm a cancer survivor. I shouldn't be here, knock on wood. And the chance to have a second shot at life has really motivated me to not waste a single moment. And then I think work ethic, watching my dad in particular be the hardworking man that he was to provide for his family, really shapes who I am. And I have a very high work ethic, and that's something that people who know me will probably say, yep, that's Brenda.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of that work ethic and that stubbornness as well.
You can call it stubbornness if you want. Can do, will do.
Um, we have, I'm sure, a lot of staff members from different nonprofit organizations and foundations in the audience tonight. So I'm wondering, what advice do you have for them to help them do their best work and move up in their careers and maybe become a CEO one day? Because I know when I was born, you were working at TCE as, oh, I don't actually know your job title, but it was not.
Not a CEO. So I shared some things when I first started here at the California Endowment with the team, and I think I'll share those with the audience that I think really have created opportunities that landed me in the seat. One is excellence, always expecting excellence of myself and the work that I do. Accountability, like really thinking about why are you doing this work and for who, and keeping that kind of front and center. Innovation, constantly thinking about how can I do this better? How can I improve? And connected to that is initiative, learning and risk taking. And they go hand in hand, right? You do risk taking so that you can learn, and then you learn from things that don't work, and then you improve. And then trusting the people that you work with, trusting the people that are above you, below you, and beside you. All these things are things that have been constants in my career. And I do believe, because I live those in every place that I've been at, it has opened doors for me, and created opportunities. The other thing that I would say is take the unexpected road, right? So when I came to philanthropy, I didn't know anything about philanthropy, but I'm like, okay, let's give it a whirl. When I went to Montana, I didn't know anything about Montana, but let's give it a whirl. When I got an opportunity to think about TCE, I was like, oh no, I'm like, let's give it a whirl. And so I think that openness to opportunities that sometimes might not feel like, they might feel scary or might not feel like the right things, but you take those opportunities and then you do the things that I just described. And I think that sets folks up for having different growth opportunities in their careers.
I think that's really good advice. And obviously, as I begin to enter my career with one more year left of university, there are questions I'll be asking you. Another thing, so philanthropy, much like journalism, which is what I'm interested in doing, it can be pretty draining and difficult on your mental health to face these problems every single day. And as much as it's inspiring, seeing people who are really doing the work to make the world a better place, it can be really difficult as well. Can you share with the audience what you do to rest and recuperate? Like, what do you like to do for self-care?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have to say our work is not nearly as hard as the work of our grantees. So I just want to name that. And we also have some challenges that we face in our work here at TCE and in other philanthropic places. And I think it's a hard time to be in this world. There's so many different challenges, and so it can be really difficult to feel like you want to get up every morning and go do the things that you need to do at work. So for me, there's a couple of things, and this, so you won't be surprised, Ellie, but I'd love to share with the audience. One, I love to sleep, and I know that's kind of funny and yet not. I'm a great sleeper, and if I had a superpower that I could give to everybody, it would be sleep. So I go. I'm like the Energizer Bunny during the day. But when my head hits the pillow, I'm out 7-8 hours solid. And that really helps me. And when the days that I don't get that sleep, that's when I get really cranky and frustrated. So making sure that I have that sleep is important. The other thing is because this work is so heady, right? Like it's reading and thinking and evaluating and processing. I sometimes just want to do something that is brainless. And so you and I share lots of trashy TV, I guess I can call it, that we like to watch together. And there's nothing that I enjoy more than after a very long, complicated day, going home and turning on and watching something like The Bachelor or Survivor or Love is Blind or Bridgerton, things that have nothing connected to my everyday work that just help me get away. And then the other thing is, I love to play. You know that about me. It's one of the big things. And so I'm always looking for ways to have fun and play. And whether that's, being on a softball team or working on a puzzle or, figuring out some other way to have some fun and laughter is an important way for me to think about self-care. I also make it in, like, I calendar it. Like, I don't just talk about doing this. I actually calendar it on my calendar, and I make ways to make time to do these kinds of things. Because if I don't have that discipline, then I don't do that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've texted me just this semester, like, are you watching the new Love is Blind season? I don't have time to watch TV. But I mean, yeah, some of our mother-daughter bonding moments are sitting on the couch watching The Bachelor and each playing our silly little like games on our phone, like double screens in front of us. But I mean, that's how we both rewind. I guess I got that from you. With our final minute or so, what is one takeaway you want the audience to have from tonight?
I want them to know that I'm just another person. I think that, I often get introduced as president and CEO of the California Endowment. And I don't actually like that, because I want people to just see me for who I am. And I hope that they got a little bit of that tonight in getting to hear about me and getting to meet you as well, Ellie. And that I'm hoping to have more opportunity to have those connections with people out in the community, and come and connect with me, just human to human.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for talking with us tonight. And to our audience, a big thank you. Watch your inboxes for a link to a recording of this event. Feel free to share it with your friends who couldn't be here, take another look for yourself, revisit any of my mom's wonderful answers. Thank you for inviting us to be part of your evening. Have a wonderful night, everybody.